Every- Thank you very much, Fiora. You know, I sometimes forget to hit record. And
Yes,
since
right.
you've already done that, I just would like to make everyone aware that this session is being recorded. Okay, and we can make it available at your request. Okay. For starters, I'd like to introduce myself and the Crown Heights North Association board members. And I'll start with myself. I'm Deborah Young. I'm the president and chairperson of the Crown Heights North Association. I'd like to next introduce our vice chair, Gail Branch Muhammad.
Good evening.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Ethel Tyus, who is not with us this evening. She's our treasurer and general counsel. I'd like to introduce Fiora Ortiz-Journa, who is our secretary. I'd like to introduce Irsa Weatherspoon, a board member.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay. Michael Combs. I'd like to introduce him, board member. Mike, say hello. Okay, I'm sorry. Mike, you got to hold it for a minute. We have Hal Drellick, who is not with us this evening. It's a family commitment. Okay. Suzanne Spellin. Is Suzanne with us? Suzanne is our historian. And I'm sure she'll be joining in. I think I covered everyone. So again, I'd like to welcome you. And this evening, we are here to give the community an opportunity to hear from judicial candidates who are running for the civil and surrogate courts. However, before I do that, I'd really like to acknowledge and just make a note of the passing of Mr. James Caldwell. He was a pillar of the community and a prominent person. He has helped so many in this community, and he gave unselfishly, and he was buried today, and we extend our sincere condolences to the Caldwell family. Okay, so again, I wanted to just acknowledge him and the good work that he's done for so many. Tonight, as I mentioned, we are providing an opportunity for the candidates to share some information with us. We are not entertaining questions from the community. Each candidate will have, I think a minute to introduce themselves and 2 minutes to answer some pre-prepared questions. Irsa Weatherspoon will be our clock monitor. And we have Gail Branch Muhammad, who will be our moderator. She is going to lead this initiative. So I am now going to turn this over to Gail. Okay, Gail?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of our participants, as well as to our candidates for judicial positions. I'd just like to say that a judge is elected or appointed official who conducts court proceedings. Judges must be impartial and strive to properly interpret the meaning, significance, and implication of the law. Judges must also show compassion and understanding for the people on both sides of the case. Tonight, China has invited candidates who are seeking election to the Brooklyn Surrogate and Civil Courts, and we welcome you all. You will have 1 minute to introduce yourself. The introduction should include, but not be limited to, why you think that you are the best person for this position. We have other questions that are prepared, and each one of you will have the same questions, and you will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. I'd like to start with introducing the Surrogate Court candidates. So we'll start with Judge Dwayne, Esther, Paul.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be before you. Again, my name is Judge Dwayne Esther Paul. I'm a candidate for Kings County Surrogate Court. I am passionate about this position because I know how the Surrogate Court changes lives. I know how it puts us in a position, our communities, our families, to protect our homes and ultimately our legacy. That the idea that one generation may start from very humble beginnings, but the next generation has a head start in life because of all of the hard work of the parents, the grandparents, and those that came before them. I'm the candidate and asking for your support because I have the experience and because I have a plan. I have a plan to advance Surrogates Court. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Judge Rosemary Montalbano.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosemary Montalbano. I'm presently a Supreme Court judge. I've been a judge for 7 years, a lawyer for 30. I've worked in the criminal court as a judge, where I oversaw domestic violence and elder abuse, which included the financial exploitation of the elderly, which we see at trickle down to the surrogate court. I've also sat as a civil court judge and a Supreme Court judge. I have been the administrator of an estate. I have fell victim to foreclosure and also, predatory lenders. I am extensive in my knowledge of deed theft, and it's happening again, and it needs to be stopped. Our borough is being taken over. And like I said, I have 30 years of legal experience, and there are many complex issues that are dealt with in the surrogate court, and I believe I'm the candidate with the experience to be able to handle it.
Well, thank you, Judge Montalbano. I neglected to tell everyone that the explanations of the court will be listed in the chat, and you can look there and it'll tell you what happens in surrogate court. And again, things that are very important to all of us. So if you want more information about what happens in surrogate court, please check the chat. And again, thank you.
Gail, you unmute yourself.
Our first speaker is Inga O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this evening and giving me this opportunity. My name is Inga O'Neill, and I'm running Countywide for Civil Court Judge. I have worked in the Brooklyn court system for almost 19 years. Actually, July the 5th will be my 19th year anniversary of working as an attorney in the court system. I am currently a principal law clerk to a Supreme Court judge. During those 19 years, I've had the opportunity to handle cases involving attorneys as well as self-represented litigants, writing decisions, conferencing cases, and also settling cases. I've also served as a volunteer small claims court arbitrator. So I've done everything that's handled in lower civil court and more. And I believe that I am qualified for this position. I've been serving the public, and I would like to continue doing so in the capacity as a judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Our next speaker will be Casilda Elena Roper Simpson.
Hi, thank you so much. Good evening. I'm running for judge because I have professionally and personally prepared myself for this position. Over the 25 years that I've practiced as an attorney, I have handled criminal cases, civil rights cases, family cases, representing a foster care agency in Fulton. I am presently an administrative law judge, and I also am an adjunct professor teaching criminal justice for the last 12 to 13 years. I have handled bench trials, jury trials, have also handled criminal and civil bench and jury trials. I have worked for the Division of Human Rights, handling discrimination cases for housing in the prosecution unit. I'm prepared for this position in that, keeping in mind that our ever-changing legal environment, I'm prepared to commit myself to dealing with all the issues that are now arising in our justice system. We have a backlog in our system, and I am qualified to hit the ground running, no learning on the job for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Civil Court of Brooklyn, 2nd Municipal District. Our first speaker will be Marva Brown.
I'm not seeing her.
Yeah, I don't think that Marva has come into the meeting.
Okay, our next speaker would be Lisa Lewis.
Good evening, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here to speak this evening, as well as all of the other candidates. I'm running for judge because, well, first of all, in the 2nd Municipal District, first because I'm a lifelong resident of the district. I was raised in Crown Heights, and I currently live in Bedford-Stuyvesant with my husband and 2 children. I have more than 25 years of legal experience, and most of that time I represented people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford an attorney. My passion for public service started in law school when I was a student intern in a juvenile justice clinic representing indigent youth accused of crimes. I started my career at the Legal Aid Society in civil practice and then the Criminal Appeals Bureau after graduation. As an appellate attorney, I fought to overturn unlawful convictions and reduce unjust sentences. I also clerked for a judge in criminal and civil court. I'm currently an attorney with DC 37, and I'm also an arbitrator in Kings County Small Claims Court. For me, being a judge would be a continuation of the community service that I've done for years. I'm a member of Community Board 3 on the Housing and Land Use Committee. Our civic engagement and youth are vital.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lewis, if you can just wind it up. Thank you.
Okay, so just to wind it up, I served on the board of the Y, where I mentored teens, and I just believe that I want to be a judge because it would be a continuation of what I've already been doing in my legal career and in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lola Waterman.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Law is my second career. I was in marketing before going to law school, and being in the business world, in a world outside of the law, I believe brings a different perspective to the practice of law. Since becoming a lawyer, I've built a practice from scratch. I'm honored and privileged to have represented and advocated for seniors, for immigrants, and for families in civil court, surrogate court, immigration court, family court, criminal court, and many other courts. I have the experience in private practice as well as in public service. I have volunteered in almost every court as a guardian ad litem representing tenants. I have volunteered in surrogate court, helping families deal with the estates of their loved ones. Currently, I work in the court system as a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice. I've had firsthand experience just observing the judge and learning daily as to what it takes to be a judge, having a built-in mentor. In the community, I am first generation American. I'm married
We're
to a
calling
pastor.
time. I'm sorry, Ms. Waterman. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, thank you. I believe Ms. Marva Brown has joined us. And we're asking that you provide a 1-minute description of yourself. Tell us about yourself. You have 1 minute and why you think that you're the best person for this position.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I apologize for being late. I'm Marva Brown. I'm running for Kings County Civil Court in Municipal District 2. I am running because as a practicing attorney for 15 years, I've seen injustice being handed down from the bench at the hands of the judiciary. I've been a public defender for 15 years. That means I have represented the indigent, the people who are in most need of services and support. And in doing so, I've been a litigator. I've done trials at the misdemeanor and felony level, bench trials and jury trials, but I've also connected clients to services where there is a need. And I think that as a judge, my experience in the courtroom as a litigator will do me well because I know the worth of a case. I know how to make arguments. I know what arguments are the strongest and the best. And that will prepare me to make the decisions that are just and right from the bench. I'm endorsed by the Working Families Party, the Jim Owls Liberal Democratic Club, and the Lambda Independent Democrats. So I am tried, true, and tested, and I'm asking for the support of the Municipal District 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have a series of questions, and these questions will be posed to all of the candidates for judge. The first, and I'm going to reverse the order so that whoever was first before will be last this time. So for Surrogate Court, Rosemary Montalbano, your question is, you have 2 minutes to respond. Please identify and speak to one very important judicial issue facing the Brooklyn community.
Well, I think the biggest issue right now that we could speak of is deed theft and predatory lenders. I'm running for Surrogate Court, and I have said from day one, I'm passionate about the court because I grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It's where I live now. My family, my father was a non-English speaking immigrant, and our home went into foreclosure, and he was a victim of predatory lenders. He signed a $10,000 note that where he agreed that if he missed a payment, that he would sell them the house for 1/3 of what it was worth. And that happened, and they were calling in that note to foreclose. In order to save the house, we had to get my husband, and he was my boyfriend at the time, a hard money loan, which is, if anyone knows, money at double the price or interest that the banks are charging. And then we had a hard time paying for that. And the one of the people said, put my name on the deed. And we did out of desperation. And then he died intestate. And then that case went to Surrogate Court. So this is happening again. People are being taken advantage of in our communities, and people are losing their homes when they shouldn't.
Well, thank you, Judge Montalbano. The same question we have for Judge Duane Esther Paul.
Thank you. So I think one of the biggest issues for communities of color in particular, if you look at the Surrogates Court, is the fact that so many people passed away in disproportionate numbers in communities of color. And so where the Surrogates Court has always been instrumental to ensuring that we preserve our intergenerational wealth, to make sure that all our assets get to that next generation, now more so than ever, the Surrogates Court is important. And so there's also been a disconnect between getting real access to justice, which means that having a help center in the Surrogates Court is instrumental. I was an acting Supreme Court justice for 4 years in family court. In family court, we have concurrent jurisdiction with Surrogates Court, which means that some of the cases that we have authority to do in family court, like guardianships, adoptions, we also do in Surrogates Court. There are so many tools and resources that are available to us in family court, to litigants who are coming into the court system pro se without an attorney, that are not accessible to the community in Surrogates Court. I'm looking to bring a help center into Surrogates Court. I sat on Community Board 3 in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I was the Director of Community Service for the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. I've put countless programs and workshops together for the community to help to bridge the gap between access to justice and real information, and bringing attorneys in to do pro bono work for people in the community. It's instrumental that that type of resource is available to communities in the Surrogates Court. And so I look to bring those type of resources.
Thank you. Our next speaker will come from Civil Court, the Countywide office. And we would ask for Casilda Elena Roper Simpson to respond to the same question.
I just want to make sure I understood the question, please.
Okay. Please identify and speak to one very important judicial issue facing the Brooklyn community.
There's several, but one of the issues that's at the forefront for me is community education. Even doing campaigning, a lot of the individuals that I've encountered have stated they didn't know that judges were even elected. They thought they were all appointed. In terms of providing community education to the communities, the other thing that should include is exactly what goes on in the court, and to assist people in getting information, similar to what Judge Dwiney Paul said, information in all levels of the court, whether it's civil, whether it's criminal. And I know housing court does have, used to have a pro se office. I know surrogate court used to have a pro se office, but I think it needs to be manned at a better rate and provide additional information. But one of the other issues is when you have people to have to come to the court, it becomes more of an issue. So when we can go into the community, similar to our community board that we have in our counties, I think similar to the community board, we can have different community type meetings for education of the constituents. The other thing I wanted to just mention, if I could, was also being accessible to the community in terms of time. One of the things I know that I encountered as a criminal defense attorney on the 18B panel for many years is that oftentimes individuals got arrested for criminal cases and they had a job. And every time, because you had to come back because the people weren't ready to come back, I think that, you know, something that should be looked into is providing night court for those type of people, especially if they can prove that they have a day job, because then if they keep coming back for their criminal cases, and most of us know that in our jobs, we only have X amount of days off, then they can lose their job. So I think that's something else that should definitely occur within the system. And last, I'd like to speak to diversity in our judicial system. There's not enough diversity, whether it's African Americans, Latina, Asian. We need more judicial representation on the bench to represent the County of Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speakers will come from the Brooklyn Civil Court, 2nd Municipal District. And the first speaker will be Lola Waterman.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there was another candidate for Countywide, Inga O'Neill.
Oh, sorry, Inga.
Hi, yes.
I
Thank you.
apologize, Inga.
No, that's okay. My Zoom kind of kicked me out for a second anyway, so that's okay. I believe that one of the biggest problems facing the judiciary right now, the court system, and the general public is being aware of access to justice and the different resources that are available. Now, the different courthouses do have offices of the self-represented, so that information can be provided to individuals who come in and they don't have attorneys. And a lot of the offices have gone virtual during COVID so that people would be able to get assistance, get help. They can call in or just log on to the court's website to get information. But sometimes people are unaware of what resources are available. So that's very important, particularly now as we emerge from COVID, for people to be aware of what resources are available if they need help, if they do not have an attorney, or if they need to start a case and they're unaware of how to go about doing so. The other thing that's very, I think, problematic is during COVID, we've been hearing cases, but there are some cases where the party's self-represented and they're unaware of the proceedings. So as a matter of trying to avoid there being a default judgment against that individual, we've been trying to send notices to anyone who is not represented by an attorney. But as we come out of the pandemic, I'm unsure of what's going to happen when the courts are fully reopened. So that's important to be able to address what happens with individuals who do not have an attorney and are unaware of court proceedings that are happening. But most importantly is being able to have access to justice and people being aware of what resources are available and how to go about getting them.
Thank you, Inga O'Neill. Again, Civil Court, Brooklyn, 2nd Municipal District, and Lola Waterman. This same question is posed to you. You have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
great. So mine too, the biggest problem that I see is access to justice and lack of legal transparency. I tend to take a grassroots approach to creating legal awareness. And part of what I've done in the community is to go out and knock on doors handing out flyers on the street and organizing and inviting people to participate in these, pro bono efforts. So for by way of example, I organize a legal clinic 2 to 3 times a year, and each and every single time we're over capacity. On average, we have about 20 to 35 attorneys. They have about 2 to 3 shifts each, and every single time we run out of space. Oftentimes, I'm getting calls afterwards with people asking when the next clinic is, when they can speak with an attorney. And you could tell that there's a dire need for legal services out there. As someone who's been in private practice, I know that a consultation just for a question or two can cost you anywhere from $250 an hour to $500 just to have a consultation. A retainer fee can cost you anywhere from $3,500 to $15,000 in retainer fees. So not having access to justice is a big impediment to people in our society. The question is, how can people get justice when they cannot afford justice? So that's a big problem that I see in the judicial system. Mental health is another issue. As someone who's a law clerk in the guardianship department, there are a lot of people that are in the court system that have mental health issues. The court personnel, everyone from the judge to the court officers, we have not been trained on how to deal with people with mental health issues. This is a big issue facing not just society, but the court as well. And, if we're able to implement some mandatory trainings, I think the people that come into the courthouse will be well served. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Waterman. Next speaker will be Lisa Lewis.
Okay, so the greatest obstacle I see to justice in the courts is the stigma that we have in the perception of unfairness. I think the confidence in our legal system has been severely undermined. Even before we had COVID and all of the things that we have seen in the news lately, there's a fundamental divide in the perception of justice between people of color and the white community, and we need to figure out how to bridge that gap. So when you get to the courthouse, you see enormous lines of people just waiting to get inside. And I know from experiences being from a criminal defense attorney and in family court and things of that nature, when people come in, there's already a resignation that the courts won't listen to them, the courts won't treat them fairly. And that in part begins even before they get into the courthouse in their daily life experiences. When people are priced out of their communities, when they have, not able to afford increasing housing costs, food costs, subpar health conditions and things of that nature. And then when they get to the courtroom, they are really just overwhelmed. There's a lack of understanding in the communities of color of what their experiences and what their problems are. And I think they feel, well, I know they feel there's a lack of dignity and respect from treatment from not just the judges, but also the personnel in the courtroom. I've heard court officers speak to litigants in a way that you wouldn't speak to someone in the street. And I think that is a problem. And I think that it's up to the judge to set the tone of the courtroom, the tone of respect and dignity for everyone who comes in, regardless of whether they are the accused or the plaintiff.
You have to call time, Ms. Lewis. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, the same question. Our next speaker is Marva Brown.
Yes, thank you. I think one challenge that affects the legal system is just the divide that occurs between individuals who are litigants in court and the judiciary. We talk about diversity in the legal system all the time, but it's not just about the color of the judge's skin, it's about the diversity in mindset and experience as well. And to say that there are not resources available for a judge to learn about mental illness or mental health issues in the community shows that there is a divide. And there are CLEs, there are educational practices that judges could take if they were so inclined. And those classes are available to judges and attorneys and court staff. And yes, they should be mandated by the court, but the fact that a person would say that it's not available and they can't get it is showing that there is a disconnect between the litigants and the needs of our community and our populations that are in court and are in the biggest need of justice. And so it is the responsibility of the judiciary to be aware of what's going on in the ground in our community, be sympathetic to it, be empathetic, to have compassion and understanding, and the wherewithal to say, how can we find a solution to the problems that are leading people to the legal system in the first place? And that's what I think is wrong. It's a divide. One person told me, Marva, you don't want to be a judge, you're a people person. Being a judge, you won't get to talk to anyone. And I said, why? I'm still going to be the same person that I'll be as a judge and still have the same care and love for my community and sense of purpose and pushing and propelling our community forward. That's what the role of the judge is, to take a leadership role in the courtroom and do what we can to use the law within the parameters of the law and administration abilities and services to uplift our community. So that divide between the judiciary and the public is a big problem within our system.
Well, thank you. Okay, we'll go back to Surrogate Court. And we have a question. Identify one of your most difficult legal issues you've had to brief and or research. Again, it's 2 minutes.
Who is it? Who's
And
the
we're
question?
asking that question to Rosemary Montalbano.
So I presently sit in the Supreme Court, so I've had many legal issues, but I think I'm going to pick one that's closest to the Surrogate Court because it was involving family property and the deed transfer, where there was a deed transfer to one of the children before the parent had died. And it was years before, so it was never taken to the Surrogate Court upon her death, but the children, the remaining children did fight that case, and it was very contested. There were 6 children in total. And, you know, the law really was in favor of the one child that had the deed because the mother had done it prior to. But in negotiating and speaking to all the children at length, we were able to settle the case in which all the children were then put onto the deed because I think, you know, and I've settled thousands of cases, I say all the time, when you bring people to the table and you talk about the pros and the cons of litigation, and again, when we're dealing with estates and legacies, you really do want to try to keep a family intact. That case probably would have lingered maybe for another 5 years. So it was, I think, the best for everyone. But in order to be able to settle a case, you need to know both sides of the case and present that to all of the litigants. And we were able to do that. You know, I've also dealt with many criminal issues on, you know, I did homicide cases for 11 years with a Supreme Court judge and wrote many decisions.
I'm sorry, Judge Montalbano, I have to call time. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Montalbano.
You're welcome.
The same question for Judge Duaney. Paul?
Okay, thank you. So I mentioned before that family court and surrogates court, we have concurrent jurisdictions. So we do guardianships in family court and surrogates court. We do adoptions in both courts. And so I had a case that dealt with an adoption. And ultimately, it was a young woman, around 18 years old. She became pregnant, gave birth to a child, did not have a tremendous amount of resources, without counsel and advice, family and other support. She had made a decision to give the child up for adoption to a two-parent household that lived in South Carolina. All intended purposes on paper, the family that was living in South Carolina may have had the best structure for this child. But ultimately what happened was that the parties did not follow what the law required as it relates to the stages and steps for a legal adoption to take place. And so first I had to assess which state law applied, because the child, although was born here, was only in New York State for 3 days. And then the child had gone down to the other state. And so I had to look at the state law, determine which law applied, and then ultimately I made a determination that the child would be returned to the mother, because in New York State, we have more strict requirements as to when an adoption is allowed and when that grace period, because there's a window of when you can officially lose the authority to take the child back. We give mental health counseling, which is mandatory for an adoption. We give legal advice, which is mandatory. There were various steps. So I had to partner with the judge that was in the other state, because there was actually an adoption proceeding in that state, because we partner when a child is leaving this state and going into another state for the adoption. And so looking through that issue between the two state laws and ultimately making a decision that was hard, but helped keep intact a family, a generation, and bringing that child
We
back.
have to call time.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Judge Paul. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next person to speak from Civil Court of Brooklyn, again, this is a countywide election, will be Inga O'Neill.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay. Identify one of the most difficult legal issues you have had to brief and/or research.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, thank you. I'm a principal law clerk to a judge. I've worked for 3 different judges. I worked with one judge, Judge Randy Jackson, in a medical malpractice part, and I worked with Judge Larry Martin in a general IAS part, meaning he handles all types of civil cases. So while I've dealt with a lot of emotions, there's one particular case that I had to do research on that I'll mention. And when you work in the courts, you can't talk about pending cases. So one of the cases, this case that I'm mentioning is a case that did go up on appeal. But it was a case that involved this gentleman who was a Meals on Wheels delivery person. And he had gone to a housing complex to deliver meals to seniors. And while in the vestibule, he got caught in crossfire and he was shot and killed. So his family was bringing a wrongful death, a lawsuit against New York City, NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority. That story, what happened to him was a very sad situation. And sometimes you get cases that really touch you because of what happened to the individuals, but you also have to focus on what the law is. It was the NYCHA had made a motion to dismiss the case, and I was responsible for researching the law for both sides and writing the decision on the case. And luckily, we were able to save the case. It was a hard decision, but we were able well, I did the research and the writing on the decision. As the judge's legal advisor, I made the recommendation to him as to why the motion should be denied. And it was denied and the case survived, and it went on appeal, and it eventually ended up settling. So sometimes cases go to trial, sometimes they end up settling, but at least there was a final resolution for the family. And I was
Thank you.
happy to be able to
I'm
be a
sorry,
part of
Ms.
that.
O'Neill. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, the next person to speak will be Casilda Elena Roper Simpson, and you have the same question.
Thank you. I've had several cases in all areas of the law. The one that's most recent that I recall handling that was that I briefed was a case that involved a family, a husband, a wife, and a adult child, and they were living in a homeless shelter. And while working as in the prosecution unit at Division of Human Rights, the issue was whether or not they were entitled to exercise their religious freedom to leave the shelter, because they were in a shelter. And being in a shelter, I learned after my research that they could not leave to go to some churches, as you know, have Saturday service, prayer service. They have to go away. This particular individual was a bishop, and he would have to go away to speak at various churches. And the homeless shelter kept putting him out because he wasn't complying with the time, the curfew time. And as a result of that happening, the issue being whether he had any exceptions because of his religion. So you would think on the face that, you know, you can't discriminate based on race, gender, religion. Well, he made the issue that they would discriminate against him because of his religion, because he said for the Jewish community, they were able to leave and go out and they were homeless. So they kept kicking him out all the time. And in handling that matter and doing the research, I was able to then learn that based on the laws and the regulations, that no, you cannot exercise your religious freedom in a homeless shelter. You have to still comply, even though he was writing passes and requesting the passes to come in later. It still did not fall under the discrimination issue.
Thank you. We have the Civil Court Second Municipal District, and we'll start with Marva Brown. Same question to you. Marva, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I had to wait for permission to unmute. I think one of my most difficult legal issues was something that came up post-conviction, in that a client, we did the trial, he was convicted, he had been made several offers on the case, and he did not, he chose not to plead guilty, and he chose to exercise his right to go to trial. And he was convicted. And on appeal, the issue was whether or not the judge abused his discretion. And it was a case where we had presented extensive
So look
amounts
what just happened.
of history about
I'm
this.
coming out the driveway, the police stop here.
And thank you. And extensive history about this client dating back to his being a second grader in the New York City Department of Education, the services that they attempted to give him. However, his mother, with her issues, was not compliant with the recommendations of the Department of Education. We presented history of his prior convictions and never being afforded the opportunity to alternatives to incarceration, drug treatment programs, nothing like that in his history. And the judge at the sentencing court sentenced him to life in prison, even though this was a case where no one was hurt, no one was killed, no one was injured. And on appeal, the issue was whether or not the judge abused his discretion. And the appellate court said yes. And we presented the same, sentencing information, sentencing memoranda to the court, and got in front of a different judge. And that judge gave the client 7 years in prison. And so figuring out how to detail the facts of the case and the history that was presented to the court in a way that showed the error of the court or the abuse of discretion of the court was a case of first impression for me, but it's something that has stuck with me and inspired me in this campaign very much, because following the law, the judge
We have to
sentenced-
call time. I'm sorry, Ms. Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have the same question for Lola Waterman.
Okay. So as we all know, estate planning is important. And we all know what happens when you don't have your affairs in order, particularly your advanced directives such as your healthcare proxy and your power of attorney. When I was in private practice, I did Article 81s, which are adult guardianships. I currently work for Supreme Court Justice who presides in the Article 81 part. And so I deal with these issues on a daily basis. The overarching idea behind Article 81 guardianships is that someone's rights are being taken away from them and given to another party, a third party. And oftentimes we get families come into court, or agencies, New York City agencies come into court asking for guardianships. And in their minds, it's, what's the big deal? I just want to help my parent. I just want to help my spouse or my adult child. But it is a big deal because, in essence, a guardianship is about taking away someone's rights, constitutionally granted rights, and giving it to someone else. So, like the right to self-determination, the right to decide where to live, how to spend your money, is taken away from that person and given to either a family member or a third party who may be unrelated to that person. There is, however, another competing interest that the court has to weigh. And, the state's responsibility is to protect its citizens, just like it is within the power of a parent to protect a child. And so every time a case presents itself before a guardianship judge, the court's responsibility is to balance the scales of justice and, balance those two competing interests. And as a practicing attorney advocating for rights of alleged incapacitated people, and as a law clerk who is basically serving as, balancing those equities, I think, that's one of the difficult things that I face on a daily basis. Ultimately, I get to advise my judge on how to rule on those cases. I have to deal and interact with the family members, with the, with the New York City agencies, with
We have to call
social
time. I'm
services.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waterman.
All right, and now we'd like to hear from Lisa Lewis. The same question.
Okay, thank you. So one of the most difficult cases that I had to brief and research was a recent matrimonial case. The parties had been married for more than 20 years and they had 4 children together. Due to the length of the marriage, the parties had developed significantly professionally and financially during the marriage. They also had accrued an exorbitant amount of debt. The way the parties managed their money was the husband gave the majority of his take-home pay to his wife, and she was responsible for paying the bills. One of the bills outstanding was rent arrears. They also had credit card debt, medical debt, car debt, things of that nature. And in the end, the bills totaled over $200,000. I argued that the debt should be shared equally or at minimum proportionate to their respective incomes. The husband did earn more, but not so much more than the wife. The wife argued that she had declared bankruptcy and discharged her share of the debt, and she shouldn't be responsible for any more. I argued that, and the judge at the time agreed that there was no proof that she had no obligation to the remaining of the debt, that she did not contribute to the balance of the debt that was owed. So we appeared before the first judge, and the judge made clear that any debt accrued during the marriage was marital unless the wife could prove otherwise. So we had to go to trial. The second judge took a whole different approach and found that the husband should have discharged his debt. I brought in a tax attorney. I wrote a memo on it. The tax attorney said that because of the amount of the husband's income, he would not have been able to discharge the debt. In the end, we ended up having to settle, and the husband had to take on all of the debt because the judge was totally against my client for whatever reason. And it just shows the difference between you go before one judge and you get one outcome, and you go before a different judge and the perspective is completely different, which is really disconcerting to the public and clients.
Thank you very much. Another question, and we'll start with going to civil court, second municipal, and we'll start with Lola Waterman. The question, again, you have 2 minutes to respond. If elected, what measures would you take to build upon the successes of your predecessor court processes for the community, for the Brooklyn community?
Yes, thank you for that question. So I look up to a lot of judges and mentors. I think I see a couple of them on this call. And I work for a Supreme Court Justice, Justice Otley, who is one of my biggest mentors. And one of the things, or a few of the things that I appreciate about her and the other judges that have come before me is their commitment to community service. Oftentimes people think that being a judge on the bench is mutually exclusive from staying connected in your community. And these judges prove time and time again that that's false. Yes, there are certain boundaries to what you could do on the bench, but a judge, in order to be able to rule fairly, also has to keep his or her ears to the ground. You have to know what's happening in your community, because that's the only way you can truly develop and have the compassion that you need to be able to hand out decisions that positively impact your community. So for me, I look up to the judges that stay connected to the community. I look to the judges that serve as mentors. Judge Otley was my mentor before I started working with her. She reaches out to people, to other lawyers, to young lawyers in the community regularly, and makes sure that, she's there as a resource for them. So again, it's important to stay connected. It's important to give back to the community that is putting us in these positions. Being a judge is not just a thing of power. It's not a thing of title. You're there to serve the people. And it's important that judges don't forget that once they get to the bench. You always have to reach back and serve the people that put you there. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Next, the same question goes to Lisa Lewis.
So I would say that one of the things that I would do is follow in, the judges that I have worked with, the judge that I did clerk for. My judge she was very fair. I mean, most judges are fair, but I would say she was very thoughtful in her processing. She really thought about each case that she had very diligently, and she put a lot of time and effort into making sure that the outcome was a fair and equitable one. So that is something that I really would look up to and aspire to. I have appeared before many judges in all over the jurisdiction, Staten Island, Queens, everywhere. And judges have very different styles and philosophies. So I've appeared before judges who, for lack of a better word, they were yellers. They would yell at the litigants, they would yell at the attorneys, they would bang on the table, and some on the bench rather, and some judges were very dismissive. They would adjourn cases without really dealing with the issues, which would make it difficult for the attorneys and the parties to know what steps to take next. And I think that is a very difficult way to judge cases, because it leaves people in limbo about what their opportunities are, what's going to happen with their case, what's going to happen with their future. So I would be a very thoughtful judge, and I would really take my time and look at every case from both sides to make sure that any decision would be fair and equitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Marva Brown, and it's the same question.
Yes, thank you. I think that moving forward, the judiciary needs to advance with the times. And part of that is modernizing the court system. I think that there are judges that are still very stuck in their old ways. There are judges that don't see the opportunities that are available out there in our community, as far as electronic monitoring as a way of releasing people while their cases are pending. It's supervised by the sheriff's department. You know, the ankle monitor, it's GPS based. They know where the person is at all times, but they're able to live at home with their families, go to programs, obtain education while their cases are pending, because they haven't been convicted of any crime. And that's a system that's been used in the federal courts and in other states for years. But there are some judges who say that's not appropriate here. And it's like, why? Other states and other jurisdictions have used it. You're just not open to it. And even as we are ending this pandemic, hopefully with Zooms, we're talking about how can we make the courts run more efficiently. Civil court has notorious for being overcrowded, you know, people waiting several hours to get their cases heard for short court appearances. And there are judges that are like, we're getting back to business as usual. We're going to open the courts and have in-person appearances again. But it's like, is that the healthiest, but also the most efficient thing to do? We need to move forward with the times. And there are many judges that I can look to for inspiration that are very tech savvy, that are open to the virtual court appearances and making allowances for people appearing in court from their jobs, appearing in court from beauty school, working on a mannequin's head, but still giving them credit for appearing in court, but still being able to live their lives and pursue their passions and support their families. And so I think moving forward, we need to modernize the courts and open up the possibilities of making our system more efficient and useful to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the civil court, the countywide position, and we need a response from Casilda Elena Roper Simpson.
And I have to first say that everything all the speakers have stated so far, I completely agree with everything and did it all. For me, from my perspective, I think I would add to that to make sure that, similar to what Marva's just said, making sure that the courtroom is accessible to the litigants, whether it's criminal court, whether it's family court, whether it's civil court. And in keeping that in mind, one of the things that I know all the years that I've practiced is that sometimes the judges seem so disinterested in what's going on in front of them. And I find that to be not just necessarily disrespectful to me, but more so to my clients. And one of the things I have learned and would like to monitor and model is what I've seen from judges who operated their courtroom with respect, who operated their courtroom and were impartial. And sometimes I've actually seen bias in some of the judges. And it throws me for a bit of a loop sometimes. But I have also seen judges who go out of their way to make sure that the clients and the litigants are handled accordingly. I remember I had a case with Judge Laporte, and she handled the young man. They just kept getting arrested all the time. And she said to him, well, do a paper or do something. And it said that she was looking at him as an individual and not just a regular criminal defendant. And when we think of the premise in family court, which is in the best interest of the child, I think as judges, we should always think about the best interest of the litigants and all the parties that are in the courtroom. And then what I would do, again, is making sure that from a community perspective, I've had my radio show for many years that I gave information to the community. My community service, NAACP, Lions Club, Rain for Life, Life Camp, it's giving information to the community. So still agreeing with one of the other speakers is making sure that we come back out and continue our community service outside of the courtroom, because it doesn't end and stop and there.
Thank you. Judge Montalbano. Judge, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm trying.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mahan.
Thank you.
I believe, I'm sorry for the interruption, but if we're sticking with the countywide, I think that we.
Inga.
Yes.
Inga, I apologize.
It's okay. I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's fine. It's fine.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Fiona, for keeping me on point.
No problem.
No, and I highly agree completely with everything that everyone else has already mentioned. First of all, being a judge is about serving people, you know, and having humility and compassion. And I've been fortunate working in the court system to have good role models of all of the judges that I've worked for, set good examples of what it means to be a good judge, somebody who's connected to what's happening in the community, and also ensuring that by whatever decisions you're making, that justice is done, not just following the law, but actually paying attention to the cases that come before the court and ensuring that the right thing is done, that there's the right outcome. Some of the judges, some of whom, you know, who I consider to be mentors, one or two of them are on this Zoom, but it's important, even as a judge, I think, to have that camaraderie with other judges, being able to look to other people who may have ruled on certain issues that you may not be unfamiliar with, and not be the type of judge who thinks you know it all and doesn't want to ask for assistance if that's something that you need help with. And knowing that when you're working in the courts as a judge or any type of employee, you are not an island. You have to know how to work with the different employees, whether it's the court clerk, the court interpreter, the court officer. You all have to work together as a team in order to be able to serve the public. And I think that's always something that you have to keep in mind, that you're serving the public and you need to do whatever it takes to ensure that the public is served. I would also continue to be involved with all the community service that I've been doing with the Lions Club, the Tribune Society within the court system, and just knowing what's going on with your community can help when you're making decisions on matters that affect people's lives, because it doesn't matter whether it's a civil case, a criminal case, or a family law case, all the decisions that you're making affect people's lives. So that's important.
Thank you, Inga. Fiona, can I move on now?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, now to Surrogate Court. And we would ask Judge Montalbano to respond to the question.
Thank you. So I've said often during this campaign and in my career as a judge, the judge's role is to be the voice of the voiceless. I've seen all too many times people come to court, they're scared, they're vulnerable. And I've always said I've made it my business to make sure that people do not leave my courtroom without understanding what they're agreeing to and not allowing them to agree to something that is not in their best interest. Ms. Young, you earlier said about Mr. Caldwell, and I'm glad that you mentioned him because he was a dear friend. And, you know, we spent time with him in the community. My husband is retired from HPD, and he held seminars with Mr. Caldwell about the tax liens. And I, you know, spoke to people about reverse mortgages. These are things that we need to talk to our communities about. Most people, when it comes to the surrogate court and wills and transfer of property or taxes, they don't want to speak to their family about it. It's not something we're comfortable with. Sometimes we get a bill and we put it on the side. But it's very important. It's very important that we hold on to our property and that we understand the rights that we have and the steps we need to take. As a surrogate, I'm going to focus on that. There are things that I think need to be implemented. I mean, there was some mention of the help center. The help center was not closed because of COVID. There were things going on. So we could have help centers, but they need to be watched because there's a lot of, again, vulnerable people going to that center and giving a lot of information to people that potentially will abuse it. There's some investigations going on. So as a judge, we really, it's not easy, but we have to not only be judges, but administrators and umbrella what information is being administered to the public and to make sure that there's not fraudulent activity going on. And unfortunately, it does happen. So
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Montalbano. Judge, excuse me.
Judge Twaney?
Yes, thank you. So there are some judges that take very innovative stance. I would highlight Judge Diana Johnson, who was in the Surrogates Court, who brought in the system of bringing multiple attorneys to represent the Public Administrator's Office. And the Public Administrator's Office is the division within the Surrogates Court that actually administers our loved one's estate if they pass away without a will. And one of the things she brought in was continuous reviews where she sat down with the Public Administrator's Office to make sure that they were in compliance and going over case by case. Tell me the status of this case. How come it's been on the calendar for 2 years? What's the movement? Those are the things that we actually did in family court. I highlight Judge Ruiz, who was the supervising administrative judge for family court. And she found innovative ways to unify the court system and provide real structure and resources to the clerk's department and to the judiciary to make sure that we were moving our cases forward and meeting our, what we considered standards and goals, so a time frame for the cases to move forward. For anyone who's familiar with Surrogates Court understands that the cases are extremely, extremely backlogged. And if the cases are backlogged, then the community is held back. The other thing that is important is bringing in a system where we ensure that there's adequate staff and advocating to make sure that we are up to speed and have sufficient people employed because they are understaffed in Surrogates Court. So I would advocate for that. I would bring in a transition team to help me make the determinations as to who should be hired as the attorneys that's servicing our communities. I would look to create an opportunity to bring in a diverse amount of attorneys with diverse backgrounds to the court system by re-engaging them, by going directly to the diverse bar associations and encouraging them to be part of the panel system that surrogate court judges can select from. I'm a strong advocate of settlements and resolution and mediation, having come from family court. So bringing in a strong structure where people can really resolve cases and move forward, because the best outcome, I believe, in court is when litigants come in, they are empowered enough to make their own resolution and their own determination. I see the time is coming for me. Time is coming.
Yes, thank you, Judge Paul. That was excellent. Thank you, Judge Paul.
Okay, we're coming to a close, and I have a final question to all of the judges and all of the candidates for judge. And I'm starting with Inga. And I would like to know, what pearl of wisdom would you impart to your potential voters as it relates to the office of which you are seeking?
Would that be about my pearl of wisdom about myself?
About yourself, or about court, or about what you want people to know, what you want?
Okay. Well, what I started off with saying, with my experience having worked in the court system in different capacities over the July the 5th, 19 years, but I actually did work a couple months, 9 months before that, actually, I started off working with it was called the Law Guardian Program. And I worked doing research and writing. I did like a little digest for the 18B attorneys, providing them with recent case law and family law matters. And I've had the experience of working in the court system in different capacities, not only as a court attorney, conferencing cases and writing decisions for judges and settling cases, both pending in the civil court, civil Supreme Court, as well as the appellate division, and also the experience of working as a principal law clerk, which is like a legal advisor to a judge, and handling all matters of civil law issues. And I've also had the experience of being a volunteer small claims court arbitrator and rendering binding decisions and settling cases. A lot of the cases involved not only attorneys, but also self-represented litigants. So I have the experience of dealing with both attorneys and self-represented litigants, handling all aspects of trials. I've written decisions that have been published in the New York Law Journal. I've done all aspects of bench trials as well as jury trials. I work in the trial assignment part, but the bottom line is that I have the experience of working in the court system, not just as a person who's there just to be there, but as somebody who's there to serve and to ensure that for whatever reason you come to the court, that your issues are resolved either through settlement, have assisted in settlements, or through trial. So I have the experience of doing what's necessary to ensure that cases are resolved in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And the same question to Casilda Alina Roper Simpson.
I'm going to please ask if you can please repeat the question, please.
Okay. What pearl of wisdom would you impart to your potential voters as it relates to the office for which you are seeking?
Thank you so much. I have been a attorney for over 25 years, and presently I am an administrative law judge. So keeping in mind that as an attorney handling all the cases and various areas of the law that I've handled, which was criminal defense as an 18B attorney, which is civil cases, actually conducting the trials, picking the jurors, and also going to verdict, civil cases, which was some of them was auto accident, slip and falls. I've also handled crane incidents that has happened for personal injury matters. As a civil rights attorney, I've handled one of the worst police brutality cases in the history of New York, and unfortunately other police brutality cases. As administrative law judge, I presently sit, hear cases, have hearings. I have hearings 3 days a week, and in doing those hearings, it requires me to make my decisions and write my decisions accordingly. And after the recommendations are made to the commissioner, they're sent out. I am prepared to hit the ground running. There's no learning on the job for me. I have actually conducted, I teach as an adjunct professor, I teach evidence, I teach criminal justice, I teach torts, I teach civil matters to my students. So the pearl of wisdom is that choosing me as the judge for this particular position means that they don't have to worry about coming to see me and me not having the ability in front of me to address their issues, because I've had an impression on almost anything that can come in front of me in civil court, because you can be assigned to criminal, family, as well as civil court. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the civil court, Brooklyn 2nd Municipal District, we would start with Lisa Lewis to share your pearls of wisdom for the voters.
So I think everyone should know that civil court judges serve for 10 years. And it's important that we elect judges who have not only the legal experience, but as many people have already mentioned, ties to the community. And for me, knowing that I can make a difference in people's lives as an attorney, as a mentor, and as an advocate has been my motivation for being attorney for these past 25 plus years. for me, being a judge would be a continuation of the service that I've already done. And I would just be able to do it knowing that I could impact even more people on a larger scale. As I mentioned, I'm a member of Community Board 3. I serve on the Housing and Land Use Committee. I mentor teens. I chair the Teen Programming Committee at the Y. I'm a member of the Brooklyn Women's Bar Association, where I mentor college students and young attorneys. So we can increase diversity in the bar, because that's the only way we're going to be able to increase diversity on the bench. I served as a delegate to the 2020 Democratic Convention. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. I served as the chair and now co-chair of Political Action. We do voter registration, education. We conduct an annual Know Your Rights workshop for our young people. We won a grant for $25,000 for census outreach. I conduct legal workshops on my own, such as landlord tenants, domestic violence. I've also been found qualified by the Kings County Judicial Screening Committee for 2 consecutive years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Thank you.
Okay. Lola Waterman, same question.
Okay. So for me, as we all know, our ballots are going to be 3 pages long, right? And it's imperative that we understand the importance of civil court judges. With a ballot that is 3 pages long, they have the judges all the way in the back at the bottom. So you have to work your way all the way to the back. Historically, people do not, flip the ballots over. And so I'm encouraging people as I go out knocking on doors and canvassing that you must flip your ballots over and make it to the judges. You cannot give up on the first page, all right? So what this means is that we have to do our due diligence before we show up in the polling sites, right? Back in the days, I would see people, researching candidates on their phone when they get to the polling site. We don't have time for that. You have to be prepared before you get there. And so it's important to attend forums such as this so that you can assess and evaluate candidates before you get there. For me, I have a long-standing record of grassroots civic engagement. Everything from organizing legal clinics, judicial seminars, senior resource fairs, legal awareness, legal transparency has been my mandate since I became a lawyer. To provide that information to the people in the community that need it the most. As relates to my experience in civil court, I'm very familiar with the civil court. I've served as a guardian ad litem there representing tenants. I've served as a small claims arbitrator, hearing and deciding cases. When I was in private practice, I represented clients there. So I'm very well familiar. I've spent a considerable amount of time in civil court, and I'll be taking that experience with me. I also believe that I'm bringing different perspectives, or I will be bringing different perspectives to the bench. As I said, I've advocated in private practice for immigrants in immigration court, for seniors doing their estate planning, fighting against deed theft. I've represented families in criminal court, in family court, Supreme Court, and as an impartial law clerk, I bring another vantage point to the table.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Waterman. Thank you.
But again, thank you. And Marva Brown, same question to you.
Yes, my pearl of wisdom for the voters and attendees of this panel and whoever watches the recording is do your research, right? I can say vote Marva Brown for Kings County Civil Court Judge in Municipal District 2, and you should, but not because I say so, not because I'm a Black woman, but because you have made an educated decision as a voter to pick the best candidate for the job. And I've made a concerted effort to put myself out there to the community, the entire community, over social media, on my website, so that voters can have the opportunity to hear from me directly. I think that as a voter myself, when I go to the ballot box and it says, pick 5 judges and there's only 5, it's a bit facetious because those people have been put there, placed there by the Democratic clubs, by the parties, by the people that they've paid dinners to for the last 10 years. And there's articles and research that show that this is what happens. The people who get put in on the ballot, they have paid to play. And so myself, my friends, my colleagues, my families have put together a grassroots campaign that is there to inform voters of my experience. I have 15 years practicing law, of my education. I went to Columbia University undergrad, the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law for my law degree. I have gone in front of judicial screening panels and other clubs where they didn't ask for any money to evaluate me and my abilities as a candidate. It's based on my presentation, my resume, my full resume is on my website. It's not a question what I've done as a lawyer or in my community, it is known. And an educated voter will take the time to get to know me as a candidate and learn that I am the best for choice municipal district 2. Thank you.
Excuse me. And now to Surrogate Court. And we would ask Judge Dwayne Esther Paul to share her pearls of wisdom.
Thank you. So my pearls of wisdom for the voter about Surrogates Court has been part of actually this campaign, because the first thing I've had to do was really enlighten and educate the community about what we actually do in Surrogates Court and how instrumental this court is, because oftentimes we've never even heard about Surrogates Court. And so the power of estate planning and the multiple ways that you indeed actually can avoid Surrogates Court. And there are some instances where you will not avoid Surrogates Court. You have a will, it needs to be probated, you go through that court. But really, the way to safeguard our homes, our assets, the things that we worked hard for, is by using the various tools. So I have taken that initiative as part of the campaign, but that's who I have been as an attorney. And that's who I've been as a judge. I talked about the different organizations I work with. I also am part of the Brownstoners of Bedford-Stuyvesant, where we went door to door, informing people that their homes were on the tax and water lien, and giving them packets of information and creating a workshop where they came in and were able to get tax waivers and things of that nature with the Department of Finance. I also sat on the advisory committee for the family court, advising the court on different ways, innovative ways to advance the court. I put together programs with the Office of Justice Initiative for the community. And so I am going to be the candidate, bridge the gap between the courts and the community. And because of that, I believe it's because of that, that I've had the support of so many labor unions, UFT, DC 37, TWU, ATU, SSEU, so many labor unions, because I will put the people first. I will work for a court that is working for the court and not having the court system used to take advantage of the community. And so that is the pearl of wisdom in terms of making sure that there are these programs and workshops and not just the legal acumen. Will come in, I have the experience, I have the education, I graduated from SUNY, master's degree, went on to George Washington University Law School, but making sure that the court works for the people and not in reverse. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Paul.
Thank you. And Judge Montalbano.
So my pearls of wisdom are, I have 30 years of experience. I've worked in 3 courthouses as a judge. I've been a judge for 7 years. I've worked in 6 as an attorney. I've done criminal, civil, and Supreme Court work. In addition, a lot of those, those issues are all brought to the surrogate court. I've been the administrator of an estate as an attorney. I, say to people, when you're electing someone to a 14-year term, it's a long time. Make sure that you elect someone who could deal with the complexity of the issues that that court handles. We could all agree that we've done community work. I've lectured on domestic violence. I've lectured on exploitation, financial exploitation of the elderly. I've spoken about tax liens, deed theft. I've lived it. My family was a victim of predatory lenders and we almost lost our house. My father-in-law inherited a house that he lost to a tax lien in the 90s. It's happening again. Not only does my legal experience of 30 years put me in a position to do the job from day one, but my life experience. And that's where my passion lies. And that's why I know that I can handle the work. I have a plan in place. There are no procedures in that court right now, no uniform procedures. Things need to change. And you can only handle the backlog if you can handle the work. Thank you.
Thank you. And in closing, it is the hopes of Crown Heights North Association that we've given you some information about judges that are running for Surrogate, Civil Court of Brooklyn, Countywide, and Civil Court Brooklyn 2nd Municipal District. Some of the information has been posted in the chat that gives you, talks about what each court is responsible for. Based on what we've heard tonight, there are really no losers. We've had some wonderful pearls of wisdom and some great responses to all of our questions. And we congratulate all of you. And thank you for participating. And we also thank our participants that have been listening to you. And for the many judges that I see named on the participant list, thank you for joining us also. Anything else, Debbie?
No, I think you did it. You did a wonderful job. I want to thank you as well, Gail, for taking, the lead in co-hosting this. You did an awesome job. So thank you. Thank you, Gail. And I don't want to take the time to repeat because I was going to say the exact same thing Gail said, so I don't have to repeat it. But I do want to add to what Gail has said in terms of acknowledging the judges who have joined us, Judge Betty Staten, Judge Robin Shears, and Judge Cheryl Gonzalez. We welcome, we thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, as all of the candidates, as well as all of the participants. So we do thank you for coming out. And as you've known from our last meeting, what Crown Heights North Association has been striving to do is just to help educate all of us about elections and make us smarter and not go to the polls and go on our phone and start Googling candidates. So that we hope that we have accomplished the goal to make sure that the information is available to the community. And hopefully as we move forward, we will continue to provide forums such as this so that everyone can be educated about what's going on in the community and things that impact their lives. I want to mention a few other things. I did not acknowledge Cheryl Thompson earlier this evening. Cheryl is a key part of the Crown Heights North Association. She prepares our minutes. She keeps us on track with so many things. She helps get our notices out. So thank you, Cheryl. And I apologize for not acknowledging you earlier. I know when I introduced the board earlier, Ethel Tyus was not on the call. I know she has joined us. So well, she had joined us. I think she's still here. So Ethel, thank you. Also want to make everyone aware of some upcoming events. June 19th, right, we're having another free shredding. For those of you who've come out before, get your papers ready. This time, however, we're going to be adding some music. Last time we had some music added with the compliments of Valerie Nero and her Block Association. So we copycat you, Valerie, and we have a group coming out to play some music on our June 19th shredding. June 19th also happens to be Juneteenth. And there's a lot of activities going on in Brower Park. I'm sure it's been posted on Facebook. We will be sharing, we as in the Crown Heights North Association will be sharing some information about the activities that go on in Brower Park. So please come out and support those initiatives. And last but not least, before I ask if the board has anything I forgot to mention, I really want to bring to everyone's attention the fight that, or the challenge that the Crown Heights North Community Historic District is facing, and that's the decision by the Landmark Preservation Commission to approve by offering a certificate of appropriateness to build on the Hebron space on Sterling Place and New York Avenue. Plans are to build this huge complex that is not going to be affordable to the community. It's not for us, and it's going to have an adverse impact on the community at large. And we fought very hard to have Crown Heights North historically designated. So we are in the process of preparing to file Article 78. So I ask you to visit the Crown Heights North website and Friends of 920. There's a lot of information there about what has happened and what's being proposed to happen on that open space. We ask if you can to make any kind of contribution so that we can hire an attorney to fight this case. There are so many lawsuits being pended against the Landmark Preservation Commission. Something has to be done. There needs to be a look at what's going on with the Preservation Commission, because with all the lawsuits, something is not right. But anyway, please look up that information and support us in trying to fight off this development coming into this historic district. Okay, I don't know, board, is there anything else that I neglected to say?
Right, this is just Gail again to remind people early voting starts June 12th. That primary day is on June 22nd. And as someone has said earlier, make sure you flip the ballot.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay, again, thank you everyone for coming out. Board, China, anyone, any last minute comments, anything I neglected to say? Okay. Well, with that, go ahead, Fiora, you had something?
Covered it.
We
And there,
covered it all?
yeah, and I just wanted to say there's information in the chat, the shredding event, flyers in the chat, and so there's information for the GoFundMe page for the legal defense fund.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please be safe, make sure you get out and vote, and have a happy and healthy and safe summer. Thank you very much. Till we meet again. Okay. Thank you.